Hello everyone, you are watching Inside Scoop and I'm your host Aditi Lamba. Welcome to another edition of ITV Gold's premier show presenting you prominent personalities, South Asian Americans from here and India. Today on the show, it's an honor to have Annetta Seecharran, who here represents Chhaya CDC, a great nonprofit and advocacy that's truly fighting for the housing rights and so much more in Queens, New York. They're going through a lot. They have a lot to advocate, a lot to voice for. And I can surely tell you that they have been one of the biggest voices for immigrants in the last few years. Let's welcome on the show, Annetta. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's amazing to have you here represent Chhaya because I've had the honor of seeing Chhaya's grassroots level work at the Capitol Hill while I was attending an event for a media gathering myself, not knowing what the organization was, to seeing them in New York, in DC, really mobilizing and coming forth, even when, Congresswoman Ocasio wanted something for Queens, she advocated for you as well, and you helped her. It's pretty interesting for me to see that Chhaya has done so much of work and so much of passion has been on the display. So just, starting this interview off, tell me a little bit about why Chhaya does the work it does. And before I go into this mission statement that I really want to elaborate for you, your relation with Chhaya, how has that been?
So I have the pleasure of serving as the executive director of Chhaya,
right.
And I've been the executive director for the last 3 years.
Wow.
Previously, I served on the board, but however, I've known Chhaya from the very beginning. So Chhaya is the only South Asian community development corporation in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Which is something I think when we first got started, we were really proud of. But today, given the scale of the need of our community, not just here in New York City in the tri-state area, but across the country, there ought to be many more Chhayas. So Chhaya was founded as a housing organization to address the housing needs of the low to moderate income members of our community. And that was 20 years ago, which is quite visionary.
Definitely.
For back then. We've continued to grow over the years, and today our mission is to build power, housing stability, and the economic well-being of our community.
Right.
When we think of South Asians, we typically think of, a successful community that's filled with doctors, lawyers, and engineers.
Correct. Our stereotype image everywhere across the globe.
Exactly. And so, however, the reality is that we've estimated in different parts of the community, the poverty rate is up to 30%.
Oh, wow.
In different parts of the community.
Our community here, South Asians here.
Within New York City.
Within New York.
Within New York City.
Oh, wow.
And these are estimates that we've pulled from the American Community Survey. One of the challenges we face is that our community is not very well documented. We don't know the numbers, and I'll talk later about why the census is a really important matter as it relates to this issue. However, we do know that there are large numbers based on existing surveys and data that are struggling economically, struggling to remain in residents of the city in their current housing situation because of skyrocketing housing prices.
Right.
Additionally, members of our community struggle with immigration issues, whether it's being undocumented or figuring out how to become a citizen. They may be documented, but they don't have the resources, or they don't have enough of a grasp on the English language to be able to pass the citizenship test. There's a whole host of immigration-related issues. And so as a community development corporation, we have a wonderful and holistic broad mandate to address the root cause of some of these issues that get in the way of our community's ability to prosper or to live to realize their fullest potentials here.
I have to sort of talk to you in that regards. Definitely, the community here that resides in New York or across the nation should feel that they're included and they're members of that country or the city that they're living in. And I think Chhaya has been doing some incredible work in raising those voices and at least making that community feel at rest or included in that aspect. You know, when we're talking about all of these issues and a lot of the communities that are targeted or at risk or are underserved or not understood or there is a lack of knowledge or resource, Queens or in New York area that Chhaya is targeting right now has a lot of that. I would love for you to sort of break down that demographics of New York. So, you know, for our audiences to understand why we're trying to bring more of that advocacy to New York, because it can actually benefit. And I think that word can really go across. Wouldn't you agree? Isn't that a reason to do something in an area like Queens?
So, Queens is, first of all, where the world comes together.
Definitely.
And it's also where our community, our sort of collective community, established its first home, Jackson Heights. And Chhaya's offices is based in Jackson Heights. And so not only is that community symbolically important, it's also, it has been and it remains the home of many new immigrants who've come to this country, to this city. I will also say, however, with the housing crisis, Jackson Heights is facing tremendous gentrification and displacement. And so now we are seeing newer and smaller pockets of South Asian settlements, if you will, or communities across the city. And so while Jackson Heights is really important historically and symbolically, and still there are many South Asians who live there,
right.
There are other, you know, communities across the city that are disconnected, not served. Queens has some significant numbers when it comes to the South Asian population,
and
actually.
A variety of South Asians.
Absolutely. So for
different parts of the world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I am Indo-Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
And the Guyanese population is the second largest, remains the second largest immigrant group.
Here in Queens?
In Queens.
Wow.
Which is quite astounding. And we have created many communities across Queens where our community revitalized those districts, whether it is the commercial district or the housing stock in those communities. And, you know, we're talking about 40, 30, 20 years ago.
Right.
And now we were stabilizing, revitalizing force in these communities, and now we are being displaced and threatened. And this is, I want to emphasize, this is happening across New York City, and not just, of course, with the South Asian and Indo-Caribbean communities, but it really, I think all.
Definitely. You know, we're bringing this basic demographics point to our viewers because we have brought Chhaya here primarily to discuss what's happening with the housing crisis and some other very pertinent immigrant-related issues that our audiences should know about. And it's very important to know how diverse Queens is because Queens is represented by a variety of South Asian and Indo-Caribbean communities. And I'm sure, Annetta, you would agree with that. So, you know, taking off of that, I know that's a huge key issue for Chhaya CDC this year, but also just generally in New York City, it's a huge issue. I would like for you to give us some insight on it.
So you mentioned the housing crisis, and so that remains and continues to be one of a leading issue impacting our communities, and one that Chhaya is continuing to work on, not just in terms of direct service, but in terms of the policy work that we are doing, such as leading the basement legalization campaign. I want to move now to talking about something that is facing us today, right here as we speak, and which is the immigration issue and the ICE raids that has our communities in absolute fear and terror. And I would argue that it is actually truly terrorizing our community, where folks are unable to function and go about their everyday lives. It's creating an incredible degree of fear and uncertainty, and it feels like a human rights violation, and it's absolutely inhumane. So this is something obviously Chhaya, as an immigrant serving organization, is of tremendous concern to us. So the first thing I want to say is go to Chhaya CDC, to our website, and you will find there a page with all of the resources and information you need in a variety of South Asian languages. At a very basic level, if an arrest, there cannot be an arrest unless there is a warrant, a legal warrant. And we have information available for community members to show folks what a warrant, what a correct and legal warrant looks like. Because in the past, ICE has used fake documentation or just DHS information to confuse people, and those are legal warrants. So at a very basic level, if there's a knock on your door, you don't need to open your door, at a very basic level. But I want to encourage folks to go to our website, and you have all the resources and information that you need. If you hear of an arrest, please call the Immigrant Defense Project, or you could always go to Chhaya. Chhaya, we are here to help. We are a resource to you. If you don't know what to do, you can always go to Chhaya.
Annetta, I have a question in regards to this, which would be on the act of the community at this point, and how they should mobilize, especially on the ICE raids. It's really gotten the entire country sentimental. There are a lot of talks about family separations. There's a lot of talks on the moral and ethical values of what's happening, what's fair, what's not fair. How do you identify somebody? What is legal, what is not? I would like for you to give an opinion on what all of us should be doing into that regards. Your personal opinion.
So as I was saying, I think it's important that we reach out to each other, that we show support to folks who we know who might be vulnerable. As individuals, we can all do something. We can also reach out to our elected officials and voice our opinions.
That's true.
I think in these times, staying silent on any matter is not an option. We're all immigrants. We're in this together, whether we're documented, whether we came here legally or not, right? And we saw after 9/11 how those federal policies impacted all of us as South Asians, right?
True.
That led to a spike in hate crimes that impacted all of us. And I think to the extent that we can stand together at a very basic level, at the individual level, but also organize, join organizations that are doing this work.
That's
Show
true.
up to protests. We cannot sit back.
So true.
Yeah.
What is your take on the power of community organizing? I think a huge part of Chhaya CDC, and even if you were at their Chatpati Mela recently, a huge part of that was also community activism. They gathered thousands of people in Queens just to talk about what's happening there for the immigrant community. But what is your take on this? And what do you think is what we need more in community organizing? So
the first notion, the first value in our mission statement is building power. We are a small organization, and we are attempting to serve a large community.
That's true.
As I mentioned earlier, our community is one of the most underserved immigrant populations. I don't believe a direct service organization will ever have the adequate resources to meet the need and every need of the vulnerable folks and in our community.
That's a valid point.
Therefore, with that premise, I believe that the way that we need to come together, organize for broader systemic change. And this is very much a strategy that Chhaya uses in its work. We view the direct service work as in service for broader systemic change, where we have the opportunity to learn and to see firsthand the challenges and the solutions to the issues that impact our community. But then how do we use that to fight for broader change? So in the housing issue, for example, illegal basements have been the homes, the first home, the entry point for thousands of immigrant communities and families. They're often decent living homes, apartments. However, they're often targeted. Homeowners who have basement apartments are often targeted, particularly, and they've been disproportionately, South Asians and Indo-Caribbeans have been disproportionately targeted in the basement crackdown. However, unfortunately, sometimes these basement apartments are not safe. So a decade ago, Chhaya launched a basement legalization campaign. And we've been leading that campaign for the last decade. We've now had a significant win with the city, where there's a pilot happening in East New York. We are now looking to scale that up so that we can, basements in New York City, we can have clear codes for legalizing basements across the city. So that is an example of how a small organization can use the insight and information that it has access to elevate that to broader systems change. Or take, for example, the rent laws that were just recently passed in Albany. Chhaya was one of the leaders of the organizing in Queens that led to those rent laws, which will help to stabilize rents in the foreseeable future. So that happened through organizing. Or Amazon deciding to leave New York City.
When we're talking about this year, Annetta, and all of the issues that are already going on, and all of the agendas that Chhaya CDC already has set, I would like for you to give us some more insights into more agenda for the rest of the year, and especially for the year 2020. I think that's going to be one of my favorite questions this year, is to ask a lot of the organizing advocacies, one of the most, the strongest advocacy programs here, grassroots level organizations. What is your next agenda for the rest of the year in 2020? Because it may be a very, very, very important year for a lot of representation, and I'm sure you would agree with that.
Absolutely. So, two things.
Yes.
The census.
Definitely.
So, I mentioned earlier that our community is, our numbers are not adequately documented. It is the census. I believe that everything starts with being counted. If we are not counted, then politicians don't pay attention to us, resources don't come to us. It's very difficult for organizations like Chhaya to then argue with the government for our fair share of those resources if we're not counted. So we are launching the South Asian Indo-Caribbean Complete Count Committee.
Okay.
And we are going to be, 10 years ago Chhaya did this, and we're going to be doing it again, but we are going to be supporting and partnering with all of the other South Asians and Indo-Caribbean organizations to ensure that our community is educated and aware of how important the census is, and that they respond. So that is going to be, we're going to be ramping up. There's going to be significant efforts, in that area of work.
Wow. U.S. Census has quite been in the news for so many things recently. It's something that really reflects what the country needs, I believe, right?
Absolutely, and I think with the citizenship question,
right,
which is no longer an issue. However, that has also, I think, added to another layer of fear, right? And so we now have to work to sort of dismantle that and give the community assurance that it is really important that you are counted regardless of your documentation status. The other piece, and you mentioned 2020, Chhaya has for the last decade been running a really important civic engagement program through which we do voter outreach and education. And for every major election, we hold candidate forums, but we hold candidate forums in our communities, in language, and that is accessible, so that our communities know that these candidates represent them and that they have the right to hold these, whoever gets elected, accountable.
Has it helped you over the years that you have been doing this work with Chhaya in educating the community through language resource, through language assistance, to just voter education? I would like for you to just reflect on that. Have you seen a massive increase on the participation of our community? And do you think we need to participate more as well?
Absolutely. So actually, with regard to the census, we were able to tie the increase in responses in Southeast Queens, in the Richmond Hill area, to the work Chhaya did 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Right. I don't have on my fingertips like the impact and the number of people who are now voting as a result, but every time we have a candidate forum, the last candidate forum we had was the Queens DA Forum, we had 400 people there.
Wow.
It was the largest candidate forum, which was led by Chhaya and other partners. So people are becoming more and more aware of this. I think, you know, as immigrants, we come here and we feel like we should, there's so many messages that we get that we don't belong.
That we should take a step back.
We should take a step back.
Yeah.
We should just be grateful to be here.
Yeah.
Which is so not giving credence to the history of immigrants in this country and in this city, and the role we've played in the economic vitality, in the cultural vibrancy, and the health and amazingness and awesomeness of the city.
That's so true. You know, if I was to ask you if there are any hopes you have attached to Chhaya, especially in its role this year and the next year, these are very politically very important years for this country as we go into the presidential election next year. What would you say in terms to those hopes for Chhaya?
I want to go back to the census issue.
Yeah.
Our goal and our hope is that we can be effective in reaching out to every single person who is South Asian in this city and ensure that they are counted in the census. Tied to 2020,
yeah,
we want to ensure that every member of our community is mobilized and votes, those that are able to vote. But I don't want to just focus on the national election. We have local elections that have sometimes a more immediate and direct impact. And so this is why our civic engagement program goes beyond election cycles. And we continue to do this work of voter education, voter outreach, and really helping our community members see the value of voting. And I will say that one indicator of how much work there is to be done is the fact that there is no South Asian elected official in the city.
Oh, that's true.
I think we're going to get there, hopefully sooner rather than later. But it is an indicator of the work that has to be done and the need for our community to continue to coalesce and build power and support each other.
Annetta, what would be one advice you'll give to the young South Asian professionals that you see all around New York City? The South Asian youth that is able to understand both parts of their American and their South Asian or Indo-Caribbean culture. As a community leader, what would you tell them?
Everybody has a role to play. So ask yourself the sort of deep and personal question, what am I doing? And what is going to be my role in these times? And what legacy am I going to leave to contribute to the greater good?
I think that's beautifully said. Well, it was amazing having you here on the show with us.
Thank you.
I would love for you to give our audience one last message and any messages that we should know for Chhaya CDC this year.
Know your rights. As an immigrant, you belong here and you have rights, whether it's housing rights or immigration rights. Vote and respond to the census questionnaire.
Thank you so much, Annetta.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that was Annetta Seecharran, the Executive Director for Chhaya CDC. Remember, she said respect and know the immigrants, know your rights, and also reach out to Chhaya CDC to learn about their amazing work and how they're organizing on the most important community level. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside Scoop. I'm Aditi Lamba, signing off.